Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Evolution, the series where we look at the history of Call of Duty. And in this series, we've looked at many things from weapons to game modes, and you guys seem to really enjoy it. So, as always, if you do, I always appreciate it when you hit that like button. But the thing is many of these things that we talk about are positive things about Call of Duty. They're game modes people liked, weapons that have been people's favorites for years. But today we're looking at something much more controversial, a thing that many people hate being in Call of Duty. Today we are diving in and looking at the history, where it began and where it is now, of supply drops.
It's gonna be all eyes on you.
So the very first Call of Duty to put supply drops into the game was Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, which is interesting because this was actually Sledgehammer's very first Call of Duty game. And interestingly enough, this was the first Call of Duty game to really diverge from the normal Call of Duty algorithm, where it was boots on the ground and you just kind of progressed almost like an RPG. However, in this game, they introduced advanced movement and supply drops as a new way of unlocking gear for your multiplayer character. So the question is, how did you earn supply drops in Call of Duty Advanced Warfare? Well, there was two ways, one of which was just you would randomly receive a supply drop every once in a while playing the game. This would happen every half hour to 45 minutes of playtime and just seemed kind of randomly. Sometimes it happened when you kill people, sometimes it happened when you got killed, but every 30 minutes to 45 minutes, you would get a new supply drop. On top of that, later in the game's life cycle, they also added in daily challenges, but that wasn't until about halfway through the game's life cycle. Now, when the game first came out, this was the only way of earning supply drops, and eventually they did add paid supply drops, which we'll talk about in a minute. However, right now, I want to talk about what you could actually get through the supply drops. So, the main thing was character gear. So, you could unlock gear sets, which would make your character look different within multiplayer. But the main thing most people were interested in was weapon variants. This is the first Call of Duty game to introduce weapons that were different than the normal base weapon. And each of these variants could be unlocked through supply drops, and upon getting them, they would have different stats than the normal weapon. Now, the weapon's rarity could range anywhere from enlisted to elite, and even later on in the game's life cycle, legendary weapons were added to the game as well. Now, originally there was only weapon variants, but eventually with DLC came DLC weapons, and the only way of unlocking these DLC weapons was through supply drops. And basically the way that it would work is the only way you would get a DLC weapon is if you got one of those weapons variants within the supply drops. This was frustrating for a lot of people because you could open hundreds or thousands of supply drops and still not get the weapons that you want. This was the very first Call of Duty game to implement this, but it definitely wasn't the last. Now, as I mentioned before, these were originally only earned within game, but eventually advanced supply drops were added in which you could actually pay for. And as you can see the prices here, you could buy one for $2.99 Canadian or all the way up to 40 for $79.99 Canadian. Remember, these are Canadian prices, so it's a little bit different in America or whatever country you are in. Now, the other important thing about advanced supply drops is that you were guaranteed no duplicates and one weapon variant at least. On top of this, you would not get things called reinforcements, which could be anything from a supply drop in-game to bonus XP going forward, which you could get through the normal supply drops. And through both the advanced supply drops and regular supply drops, when opening them, you would get 3 items. Now, another important thing to note that is in this game, if you were to get duplicates, for example, the Atlas Police shirt I have here, you could actually redeem it for XP instead of just keeping it in your inventory. This would make it so getting a duplicate wasn't completely useless. So this was basically supply drops in Advanced Warfare. The first time we ever saw them, but definitely not the last. And speaking of which, next we move on to Black Ops 3. Black Ops 3 would take this a step further, seeing the success of supply drops in Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, this time building an entire market around them called the Black Market, of course, hosted by the famous Blackjack or Danny Lee. And what you are seeing here in the black market is very different than what was launched at the beginning of the game. At the beginning of the game, there was no Call of Duty points, there was nothing like that. There was only crypto keys and supply drops. So let's hold the phone there and start by talking about crypto keys. Crypto keys is basically a currency in Black Ops 3 that allows you to buy different supply drops. For example, for 10 crypto keys, you can buy a common supply drop, and for 30 crypto keys, you can buy a rare supply drop. Basically, the only difference is the rare supply drop would guarantee you higher tier items and bonus crypto keys. Now, as far as how you earned crypto keys, it was simply based off of time played. And essentially, you would get one crypto key for about every 5 minutes played, so it really takes some time to earn these supply drops in this game. Now, on top of that, eventually there was also daily and weekly challenges added into the game that would allow you to get crypto keys faster. However, like I said, that was later in the game's life cycle. Now, on top of this, speaking of later in the game's life cycle, when supply drops were first announced to be in the game, Treyarch promised us that they were going to be cosmetic items only. Weapon camos, character skins, that kind of thing. However, as we know, that was not the case. Eventually, when DLC weapons were added into the game, they were added into supply drops. The only way you could get them is get lucky through supply drops and hopefully open yourself up a brand new shiny weapon. On top of that, Call of Duty points were added in, so you could spend 200 Call of Duty points, aka about $2 American, and this would give you a rare supply drop. Now, the problem with this is people were pissed that the only way to get these DLC weapons was to spend literally hundreds of dollars and just hope to get lucky like a slot machine. This is when the Call of Duty community introduced something called Black Market Blackout, which was essentially a way of getting people to stop spending money on the black market in order to make Treyarch have to change it. Now, Treyarch didn't change it, but they did implement things like challenges, triple plays, and grand slams, which we'll get to in a minute. Now, once again, duplicates were also in this game, and essentially what you could do with duplicates is burn them to get yourself more crypto keys. So when you burnt duplicates based off of their rarity, they would give you a set amount of crypto keys based off of those items. So once again, duplicates weren't 100% useless. Now, there were also other deals as well that you could eventually buy, like triple plays that would guarantee you DLC items, 100 drop packages that were on sale for basically half off, or Grand Slam bundles, which would once again guarantee you certain items. On top of that, later on, there was a 6-pack and daily double that you could buy once a day for 45 crypto keys, one of which would give you 6 common supply drops, the other 2 rare. And once again, these were things that were added in later in the game's life cycle. Now, obviously, as you can see, the biggest complaint with the supply drops in this game was the fact that you could open thousands of supply drops and just not get lucky and not get DLC weapons. And that was people's biggest problem, is that the only way to get these items was to just keep opening these things up like a slot machine. And believe it or not, this would actually trigger a change in supply drops moving forward. Speaking of which, the next game to have supply drops is Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. So Infinite Warfare is where things start to get really complex, but I'll try to go through it as simply as possible. So to start things out, there is now 2 other currencies in Infinite Warfare aside from just Call of Duty points. There are keys and there is salvage. Essentially, keys are used to open supply drops, 10 keys for a common supply drop, 30 for a rare, just like in Black Ops 4. Now, salvage is a little bit different because in this game, you could actually go ahead and buy individual weapons with salvage. Now, as far as how to receive keys, there is 3 ways. 1, every day you get a login bonus. The second is there is weekly challenges. And the third is if you just play multiplayer or play zombies, you receive keys based off of time played. It's about 1/4 of a key per minute, so a key every 4 minutes. Now, as far as how to get salvage, you can get salvage through opening supply drops. You can get salvage by completing mission team challenges. And finally, once again, that daily login bonus or weekly challenges like we talked about before. Now, salvage can be used to unlock prototype weapons or also prototype score streaks, which are just weapon variants and score streak variants, which we've seen before in previous Call of Duty games. And honestly, these act very similarly to what we saw in Advanced Warfare as well. So it was nice that you could just buy these, but once again, Call of Duty got a little bit greedy and implemented items that you could only get through supply drops. These are Mark II variants and Quartermaster variants, weapons that were only available through supply drops. Oh, and I forgot to mention before, the Quartermaster is just the black market of Infinite Warfare. Now, the other thing that I have to mention, and this doesn't really have to do with supply drops, but DLC weapons in this game were not linked with supply drops. There were prototype variants that were, but to unlock the DLC weapons, you either just had to have the season pass or complete a challenge. So in other words, DLC weapons were no longer locked behind the supply drops. And this was Infinite Warfare supply drops in a nutshell. The next one is a controversial one. After Infinite Warfare, the next game to get supply drops was Modern Warfare Remastered. Now, at the launch of Modern Warfare Remastered, there was no supply drops. However, later they were introduced to the game, and this was something that some people hated, some people liked. But all in all, if you really look at it today, this system that they implemented is one of the better supply drop system that ever existed in a Call of Duty game. In fact, a very similar system to this got implemented in the next game, Call of Duty World War II. Now, we've had the black market, we've had the quartermaster. In Modern Warfare Remastered, it was called the Depot. Once again, you could buy rare supply drops for 200 COD points, or there was a new currency called Depot credits. Once again, 10 Depot credits for a common supply drop, 30 for a rare supply drop. These operated exactly the same as crypto keys from Black Ops 3 or keys from Infinite Warfare. Once again, you got them by simply playing the game. Now, the one downside to Modern Warfare Remastered is there was no daily challenges. The only way to earn these keys, or in this case Depot credits, was simply by playing the game. Now, there was also another currency called bonus parts that you could get similar to salvage by opening up supply drops, getting duplicates, or opening rare supply drops. And with these bonus parts, you could then go ahead and buy individual items within collections. And if you were to buy a whole collection, you could get better items, for example, DLC weapons. So DLC weapons were also implemented into Modern Warfare Remastered, and you got them either by opening them up in a supply drop or buying their collection with these bonus parts. Now, the final new thing in this game with supply drops was different types of supply drops. So as you can see at the top here, we have Copperhead, Lion Strike, and Arctic Wolf. In each of these different drops, you get different items for different collections. So if you want to get things from a collection from Lion Strike, for example, you have to open Lion Strike supply drops. And this is something we'd actually see brought forward into the next Call of Duty game that had supply drops, Call of Duty World War II. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Call of Duty World War II was not my favorite Call of Duty. In fact, it's probably not even in my top 5. But as far as supply drop system goes, I think they knocked it out of the park with this one. I think it was relatively easy to get all of the items. All you had to do was play a bunch. And they made it easy with the system that they put forward. In Call of Duty World War II, there were no keys, crypto keys, or anything like that to buy supply drops. There was 2 ways of getting one. Either randomly at the end of the game you would get one, or you could complete various challenges to unlock these supply drops. In fact, Call of Duty World War II implemented a whole new system called the Headquarters, which was kind of like this live hub where you could go and get your daily and weekly challenges. And these challenges could give you supply drops or the new currency called Armory credits. Now, Armory credits were important because, once again, there was a quartermaster in this game that you could go to, and within the quartermaster there was something called collections. This is where you could unlock individual items, or if there were DLC weapons, buy an entire collection with Armory credits and get that DLC item. On top of that, you could also unlock the DLC items with supply drops in the Headquarters once again. On top of that, you could also unlock the DLC items with supply drops in the Headquarters once again. Speaking of which, for each new event, whether that be the Resistance, Blitzkrieg, Winter Siege event, they would also implement new types of supply drops for those events which would hold those items. Even if you missed those supply drops, you could still go into collections and buy those individual collections with Armory credits that you could earn year-round. Now, by no means am I saying that this is a perfect system. I think there's lots of problems with it, especially with the challenges that they put in the HQ, and there were a lot of filler items put into supply drops, like pistol grips, for example. But it's better than I think any other system we've had, especially when we compare it to the next system, which is no longer called supply drops, but rather reserves in Call of Duty Black Ops 4. Now, I could literally go on hours talking about reserves and why they're bad. A couple of the reasons, though, just to put them out there, is first of all, the reserves that you get for free, you only get one item in them. If you get a duplicate, you get nothing for it unless it's your third duplicate. As we looked through these in every other Call of Duty game, every single version of supply drops, you got something for a duplicate. Even in Advanced Warfare, it may not have been a new item, but you got XP when you got duplicates. In this game, you get jack shit unless it's your third duplicate. On top of that, To me, it seems like the game simply wasn't designed for supply drops, that it was something they decided to add in afterwards to boost their earnings, and because of that, there's so many holes in this system, like only getting one item out of a reserve, or the duplicate problem, and because of that, it makes me question where this is going to go and if it will get any better, because in my opinion, this is the worst version of supply drops that we've seen. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is supply drops in every single Call of Duty game that they have been in. They started off in Advanced Warfare, and here we are today in Black Ops 4 with reserves. So what I want to hear is down in the comments, let me know, what do you think is the best system that has been implemented for supply drops, and what do you think of where they are now? On top of that, do you think there's a position for them in future Call of Duty games, or should they just be removed altogether? Let me know what you think down in the comments. Also, as always, these videos take a ton of effort, so if you did enjoy it, I would really appreciate it if you could hit that like button. And if you're new to the channel and like what you see, be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, as it's the best way to stay up to date on all of my videos. But guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, peace out, guys.
We are reaching for the stars, but we're making